People often talk about breaking bad habits as if it's a simple matter of discipline. But I learned the truth on a winter morning when the sky was the color of cold steel and my breath came out like tiny ghosts drifting away from me. I had reached a point where every promise I made to myself felt like a lie. Every attempt to change ended in the same quiet failure, and the weight of disappointment sat in my chest like a stone I couldn't lift. That morning, while pacing outside a small temple on the edge of Kyoto, I felt something inside me fracture. Not painfully, but like a thin sheet of ice giving way to deeper water, revealing something I had ignored for years. I didn't know then that the old monk who stepped out of the temple door had been watching me for several minutes, or that he would hand me a lesson so strange and ancient that it would follow me for the rest of my life. He simply asked why my footsteps circled the same patch of snow over and over, and in that moment, his question felt like a blade slicing clean through the fog I'd been living in. I told him I couldn't break a habit that had been controlling me for years, and the way he listened, head slightly tilted, eyes soft but piercing, made me feel as if he could hear the part of me I'd never said aloud. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet enough that I almost missed it, yet it felt like the world paused around his words. "You are not fighting your habit," he said. "You are fighting the emptiness it is trying to fill." He invited me inside the temple, where a single candle flickered as though it breathed. He asked me to speak of my habit, but instead of describing the surface, he urged me to notice the moment just before it rose, the restless tension, the quiet ache, the old impulse that waited beneath my thoughts. I confessed how many plans I had made, how many promises I had broken, how shame clung to me like a second skin. The monk nodded, as though he had heard the same confession 1,000 times from souls wandering through their own winters. He told me of an ancient practice once known as Kuchios no Michi, the path of calling things forth, a way of seeing habits not as enemies, but as messengers. I listened, unsure whether to believe him, yet strangely comforted by the steadiness in his voice. He said the practice was simple. You pause, breathe, invite the true need beneath the habit to reveal itself, and the habit, no longer carrying a hidden burden, begins to dissolve. I felt both skeptical and hopeful, sensing the faintest shift inside me. He guided me through gentle questions that opened small doors within me. What I feared would happen if I stopped, what comfort the habit offered when the world felt too heavy, and when I first learned to lean on it. Each answer, even the uncertain ones, loosened something tight in my chest. I began to feel as though the habit had been trying to protect me, awkwardly and imperfectly, from loneliness, fear, and the quiet ache of being unseen. The monk watched my face soften as realization settled over me, and for the first time in years, I felt something other than self-blame. I felt curiosity. He pressed a wooden bead into my palm, warm from his hand, and told me to keep it close. When the urge returned, he said, I should touch the bead and ask, "What are you calling forth?" The question, he promised, would clear the fog that habits wrap around truth. I carried the bead everywhere. At first, nothing dramatic happened. The habit still pulled at me, familiar and heavy, but now there was a pause, a breath, a tiny doorway between impulse and action. In that space, I began to notice what the monk meant. I wasn't craving the habit itself. I was craving relief, companionship, escape, the feeling of not being alone with my thoughts. Each time I touched the bead, the urge softened, not vanishing but losing its sharp edge. I started journaling, tracing each impulse back to its origin. Patterns emerged. Exhaustion, fear, longing, moments when I felt unmoored from myself. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the habit loosened its grip. Not because I forced it away, but because understanding left it with nothing to hide behind. One night, I walked along a quiet river, the moon trembling across the water like a lantern caught in a gentle wind. I felt an unexpected calm settle inside me. The emptiness I had feared for so long no longer felt like a threat. It felt like a space waiting to be filled with something real. I touched the bead and noticed the surprising truth that the urge did not come. Instead, there was a quiet steadiness that felt new, tender, like the first warmth of spring after a long winter. I realized the monk had never promised to break my habit. He had promised I would understand it. Understanding, it seemed, was the doorway through which change walked gently, without force or fanfare. The habit that once ruled me no longer felt like a master, but like a memory of who I used to be. In the months that followed, I noticed a shift, not only in my behavior, but in my presence. Friends remarked that I seemed lighter, more grounded, as though the unspoken heaviness I carried had begun to lift. They didn't know about the temple or the cold morning when everything quietly shifted. They only saw that I met the world with more softness than before. I began to understand that healing was not about perfection, but about meeting myself with honesty and compassion. The bead remained in my pocket, its surface becoming smoother with time, a reminder that change is shaped by countless small moments of choosing awareness over avoidance. I learned to sit with discomfort, to listen without judgment, and slowly the parts of me I once hid began to feel safe again. Eventually, I returned to the temple, unsure whether the monk would even remember me. He was sweeping leaves when I approached, and before I could speak, he smiled as though he already knew why I had come. I thanked him for the teaching, for the bead, for the quiet wisdom that had taken root in my life. He shook his head gently and said the method had worked only because I had been willing to listen to myself. "You did not break the habit," he said. "You allowed it to release you." His words settled over me like warm light, and for the first time, I understood that transformation is not an act of force, but an act of gentle courage. As I left the temple, the winter wind brushed against my face, cool, but not cutting, and I felt the quiet truth of everything I had learned. I walked down the mountain path, feeling as though each step carried a softness I had never known. The world looked unchanged, yet I felt changed in a way that was subtle but unmistakable. I realized that the monk's practice had not erased my struggles. It had taught me how to stand beside them without fear. The emptiness I once tried to drown with old habits had softened into a space for new beginnings. I learned that every habit, even the ones we hide in shame, carries a quiet message. When we finally listen, the message becomes a map, guiding us back to the parts of ourselves we abandoned long ago. And though my journey is far from over, I now move forward with a tenderness that steadies me through every rising urge. I know now that breaking a bad habit is not an act of war, but an act of listening, of honoring what the heart has been trying to say. And as I continue walking this quiet path, I feel the monk's lesson living in me. Transformation begins the moment we choose to listen with compassion instead of fear. From that gentle awareness, I learned to move through my days with a steadiness I once thought unreachable, trusting that each small moment of honesty reshaped the world inside me. And as I continue forward, I carry the monk's quiet teaching like a lantern in my chest, reminding me that even the softest choices can redirect a life, and that every breath holds the possibility of beginning again. In that simple truth, I found a freedom that felt both fragile and enduring, a quiet promise that change was never out of reach again.